A grizzly attack so terrifying that it was turned into a book. Rare but real. Humans invading wildlife has been a problem for so many years and nobody seems to be bothered by it. But when nature strikes back, the civilized race can't seem to take it well. That is exactly what happened in 1967 when a pair of bears attacked two women at Glacier National Park, reminding everyone that they are in charge of the woods. This story is based on real-life events and is not an exaggerated fictional tale. Every moment and every decision is pulled straight from reality and is going to leave you on the edge of your seat. By the end, you will be praying that you won't ever encounter a grumpy bear. The Glacier National Park has always been an attraction for tourists. The scenic views and the tree-lined hiking trails attract visitors from all over the U.S. The summer of 1967 was prime time for most vacationers, but then it was halted by the shocking events that unfolded on the night of 13th of August, when two bears made public appearances and ran quite a show. Unfortunately, that ended with two young women being mauled by them. That incident was followed by dramatic changes in the park policy, but by then the harm was already done. The two events took place in parallel. They involved two women of the same age, Julie Helgeson and Michelle Coons, and a couple of deadly beasts. Both worked in the park's lodges, Julie at East Glacier Lodge, and Michelle at West Glacier's Lake McDonald Lodge. Julie was accompanied by her partner, Roy Ducat. They started their hike from Logan Pass. It was an 8-mile hike up the Highline Trail. Granite Park Chalet was their destination. They reached around 7 p.m. and had their dinner up there. Then the couple enjoyed the sunset and decided to call it a night. Since it was tourist season, they had failed to reserve a spot at the chalet. But they didn't let it get in the way of their adventurous experience. 2 sleeping bags were all they needed for the overnight stay in the woods. The thought of being bugged by animals did not even cross their minds because the campsite was crowded with people, and forest creatures tended to stay away from such areas. But were the chances of a wildlife encounter really zero? Tired from the long hike, they immediately drifted to sleep, but their sweet dreams were disturbed by a not-so-sweet intruder. A big brown bear had found the campers tucked in their sleeping bags and was about to turn the peaceful camp night into a horrifying one. Julie was the first to sense the grizzly, and instead of panicking, she nudged Roy to wake him up. She whispered to him, "Play dead." A bear seems less threatened by a lifeless man than one who decides to poke him with sticks. The latter one gets his head chopped off in most cases, and Julie was smart enough to show the appropriate response. However, this time, playing dead didn't quite help. Before Roy could process Julie's words, he was yanked from his sleeping bag and thrown away by 2 big claws. That is when he realized the true meaning of her words. He landed face first in the dirt, but didn't move. He held his breath and the grizzly walked around him. Then it stalled away. Roy thought it lost interest, but soon after, he felt piercing teeth biting his arm. He held back on the screams and lay there patiently. The bear had its fun with him, but when he didn't respond, it finally moved on to the next target. Julie had less pain tolerance and couldn't silently endure the grizzly's strong blows. She screamed with pain, and that agitated it even more. The giant dragged her almost 100 yards away from the campsite. She shouted, "Sounds to someone and help us," but nobody was there. As her screams grew distant, Roy got up. His arm was swinging lifeless on his side. The bear had completely crushed it. Putting his pain aside, he looked for the flash camera in their backpack in hopes that the strong light might scare the bear away. Julie's screams grew distant. He realized it had gone far, and the camera wouldn't help. Instinctively, he ran to the nearest outpost to wake people up for help. Fortunately, the campers there were able to help Roy. They raised the alarm and flashed SOS to the rescue rangers building in the distance. The alarm had woken them up, and they immediately reported to the campsite. A bleeding man with a mauled arm was a sight they did not expect. They rushed to provide first aid to him, but he kept urging them to search for his partner. The rescuers knew if they left Roy in such a condition, he wouldn't survive, so they carried him up to the chalet. A surgeon was residing in the camps up there, so he attended to Roy. The rangers now wanted to search for Julie, but the one in charge was stubborn. He wouldn't let them go down until a trained ranger with a rifle arrived. Sending the team into the forest without a shooter did not seem to be a good idea to him. There was a high chance that the bear was still out there, and seeing multiple people around its area might agitate it even more. After a nerve-wracking wait, a rescue helicopter arrived. It dropped the trained shooter and airlifted Roy to the nearest hospital for treatment. It took 2 whole hours to form a search party and send it into the woods. Almost 400 feet from the campsite, they found Julie lying motionless on the ground. Her body was covered in brutal wounds. They told the story of the horrible bear encounter. Surprisingly, she was still breathing. The rescuers immediately carried her tormented body to the chalet for emergency medical assistance, but she couldn't endure the injuries and passed away in the most horrific way. This incident was the first human encounter with wildlife in the park in almost 57 years, and it was going to leave a mark. But the night was still young, and soon after, another tragic incident rolled in. A different group of hikers was also set up for a bear meeting that night. Michelle Coons, along with 4 of her friends and 1 dog, set out on a trail to Trout Lake. They were cooking hot dogs and grilling fresh fish when a bear decided to join the party at about 8 p.m. However, it scared away the rest of the members and enjoyed the nice dinner on its own. It also looked into one of their backpacks to find some snacks, but then walked away. The group decided it was best for them to move away from the campsite. One of them suggested they go back, but walking in the woods with no protective gear would have been an absurd idea. They decided to sleep near the beach and leave by dawn. Taking what was left after the sudden bear rampage, they set up a campfire and settled around it in their sleeping bags. They even stacked some fallen tree logs to build a defensive wall between the original campsite and their new resting place. After having their dinner poached by the nosy Grizzly, they sufficed on some cookies and Cheetos. At around 3 a.m., the Grizzly made a reappearance at the original campsite. Michelle saw it first and alerted the others. This time, the bear grabbed a pack of cookies from near the logs and ran away. All the members of the group were wide awake by the second encounter. The fire had already died down, so they rebuilt it and waited for sunrise to leave the campsite. They could hear the bear walking around the lake close to them. However, around 4:30 a.m., the bear came near their camp again. And this time it was clearly not in the mood for hot dogs and fish. It sniffed around the campers while they put up the universal response, "Play dead." They could bear the heavy breathing of the Grizzly near them, but they stayed still. A slight movement could cost them their life. The Grizzly moved close to one of the campers and sniffed him. Then it bit his sleeping bag with full force and clawed his sweatshirt. This made him drop the act. He shoved off the Grizzly and ran to the nearest tree. In normal circumstances, it would have taken him an hour or so to climb the tree, but his fear-driven body was 40 feet up in a heartbeat. The bear was startled by his moment, but it followed him and started circling the base of the tree. That was when 2 of the other members found their chance and climbed another tree along with their dog. Screams started echoing near the beach, signaling that the bear was back in the campsite. It fixed its focus on the rest of the 2 campers. Michelle and one of her friends were still stuck in the bear's vicinity. It sniffed on one sleeping bag, but then walked away. This gave the man an escape. He immediately ran and climbed a tree. Michelle was left alone to have a one-on-one session with the bear. Her friends yelled at her to join them in the trees, but the bear had already locked the target, and it was not letting its only prey get away. The bear shifted all its focus to Michelle. She was contemplating running away to her friends, but the iron jaw of the bear landing on her shoulder shrugged that thought away. It bit onto her arm, picked her up with the bag still wrapped around her body, and dragged her away into the forest. She tried to resist, but her weak attacks were nothing compared to the ultimate strength of the bear. Her friends could hear her horrifying cries for help, but they couldn't possibly take down a bear with bare hands. Soon after, her cries were silenced. The rest of the members didn't risk getting down and stayed up in the trees for 2 more hours. As the first rays of sun peeked through the woods, they immediately ran up the trail. On their way up, a couple helped them and drove them to the nearest rescue station. The rescue rangers were shocked to hear yet another appalling incident of the night. They instantly trailed back to the campsite and started searching for Michelle. The search did not last long because the bear had left trails. A torn sleeping bag and bloody clothes showed them the path of the Grizzly. They followed the clues and reached a clearing where Michelle's lifeless remains lay on the ground. The sight was horrifying for the rescuers and two of her friends who had accompanied them to find her. Her body was partially consumed by the bear, and it was visible how it had brutally dealt with her. The unrecognizable remains were airlifted out of the area. The tragic deaths of two women within merely 12 hours had shaken up the Park Service. It was as if the bears had bet on who had more kills by the end of the night. Immediate action was taken, and teams were formulated to locate the bears and hunt them down before they went on killing more humans. They killed 3 bears in a couple of days. One of the bears was found to have a ball of blonde hair in its stomach, and it was confirmed that it was the same bear who had taken Michelle's life. Julie's killer was also assumed to be one of the 3 bears since it was found near the attack site. The park authorities were taken aback by the events of the night, but they stated it was bound to happen sooner or later. Humans were encroaching way deeper into wildlife, and nature had its way with them. Food waste, garbage, feeding wildlife, and camping near animal fields without permits facilitated these events. The Park Service had also received prior reports of seeing bears too close to humans, but they didn't quite pay heed to them. It took the loss of 2 women for them to realize the intensity of the situation. Any further delay in appropriate actions could cause much more catastrophic results, so they made strict policies forbidding people to go anywhere near grizzly territories and to leave food trails behind them. A pack-in, pack-out rule was also implemented. Visitors who fed bears and had messy campsites were met with repercussions. A permit system was established, and no campers were allowed outside the campsites. In addition to that, warnings and bear signs were also installed everywhere in the park. Jack Olson, a journalist and author, investigated the events and wrote a book named Night of the Grizzlies. In his book, he rightfully accused the park management of the demise of 2 young women. He also wrote, "It is pure coincidence indeed that 2 grizzlies chose a few hours of a single night to take 2 victims who had much in common, but it's no coincidence at all that the year in which this happened was 1967 and Place Glacier Park." These events make us wonder how the night would have ended for the girls if the park had noticed the warnings and implemented timely actions. That was it for the video. And we would humbly like to remind you that before your next adventure in the woods, don't forget to read a manual on how to stay alive in grizzly country. Thank you for watching. For more such videos, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to like and share.